The biting Kansas wind whipped strands of my damp blonde hair across my face as I sprinted down the street, the relentless rain plastering my blazer to my skin. I swore under my breath, of all the days to forget my umbrella, it had to be the day the heavens decided to open up. Overland Park usually had a certain charm, a quiet Midwestern appeal that I appreciated, but today it felt more like a dreary, waterlogged movie set. High heels weren't exactly ideal for navigating the slick sidewalks, and I could feel my carefully applied makeup beginning to run. I just had to make it to the corner deli for a late lunch before heading back to the office. My stomach grumbled in agreement. Just as I thought I might actually hydroplane across the street, I spotted the awning of a quaint little shop a few yards ahead. Relief washed over me, almost as potent as the downpour. I lunged for the dry sanctuary, nearly colliding with a woman who was already sheltering there. "Oof, sorry," I gasped, stumbling slightly. My breath caught in my throat. She turned, her blue eyes widening in surprise before softening into a gentle smile. Dark, rich brown hair framed a face that was both striking and approachable, her lips full and slightly parted as she took me in. I felt a strange jolt, a sort of electric hum that had absolutely nothing to do with the weather. She was beautiful. "No worries," she chuckled, her voice warm and melodic. "Plenty of room for two under here." I straightened, suddenly hyper-aware of my damp, disheveled appearance. I tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, trying to regain some semblance of composure. "Thanks," I managed, my voice a little breathless. I discreetly wiped a trickle of mascara from beneath my eye with the back of my hand. We stood in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the rain cascade onto the street. The air smelled of wet asphalt and something faintly sweet, almost floral. I glanced at the shop window. A whimsical display of mismatched teacups and colorful pastries hinted at the kind of place that offered a much-needed escape from the mundane. "Cute place," I commented, trying to break the silence that was starting to feel a little charged. "Thanks," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "It's mine. The Mad Hatter's Tea Party." A playful smirk danced across her lips. "I'm Kennedy." She extended a hand and I took it, her touch sending another unexpected wave of warmth through me. "Fiona," I replied, my own smile mirroring hers. Her hand was firm and cool against mine. I held on a second longer than necessary, not wanting to break the connection. The rain showed no signs of letting up. Kennedy tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made my cheeks flush. "You look like you could use a warm drink," she said, her gaze lingering on my face. "My treat, come on in." She gestured towards the door, and I found myself nodding before I could even formulate a thought. The prospect of extending this unexpected encounter was far too tempting to resist. Inside, the café was even more enchanting than the window display suggested. Mismatched furniture, whimsical artwork, and the soft glow of fairy lights created an atmosphere that was both playful and inviting. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baking pastries hung in the air, a comforting blend that instantly eased the chill from my damp clothes. Kennedy led me to a small table tucked away in a cozy corner, the walls adorned with framed quotes from Alice in Wonderland. She disappeared behind the counter, her movements graceful and efficient, as she prepared 2 steaming mugs of something that smelled heavenly. "Hot chocolate," she announced, placing the mugs on the table. "With a touch of cinnamon, perfect for a rainy day." I wrapped my hands around the warm ceramic, feeling the heat seep into my chilled fingers. "Thank you," I murmured, taking a tentative sip. The rich, creamy liquid was just what I needed. We fell into easy conversation, discussing everything from the unpredictable Kansas weather to our favorite books and movies. I learned that Kennedy had always dreamed of opening her own café, inspired by her childhood love of all things whimsical and fantastical. I told her about my work as a project manager, a career that was challenging but ultimately fulfilling. I discovered a shared passion for vintage vinyl records and a mutual appreciation for quirky independent films. With every passing minute, the initial spark of attraction intensified, growing into something that felt both exciting and strangely familiar. The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate in my hands. The following Saturday, I found myself drawn back to the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. It wasn't just the promise of excellent coffee and quirky decor, it was the lingering memory of Kennedy's smile, the way her blue eyes had held mine, the electric hum that had passed between us in the rain. I told myself it was just a friendly visit, a way to support a local business. But deep down, I knew I was hoping for another encounter with the captivating cafe owner. The tinkling of the bell above the door announced my arrival. Kennedy looked up from behind the counter, her face breaking into a wide, genuine smile that made my stomach flip. "Fiona!" she exclaimed, her voice warm and welcoming. "Back for more?" I couldn't help but smile back. Couldn't resist, I admitted, my gaze lingering on her. She was wearing a simple black dress that accentuated her curves, her dark hair pulled back in a loose bun, a few stray strands framing her face. She looked even more stunning than I remembered. The cafe was bustling with activity, a mix of students hunched over laptops, couples sharing intimate conversations, and families enjoying afternoon treats. Kennedy gestured towards a vacant table near the window. "Grab a seat," she said. "I'll bring you the usual." I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "The usual?" I asked, amused. "We've only met once," she winked. "I have a good memory for faces and coffee orders," she replied, a playful glint in her eyes. I chuckled, feeling a blush creep up my cheeks. She remembered my order. A small detail, but it made me feel strangely special. A few minutes later, she arrived at my table with a steaming mug of latte, artfully decorated with a swirling heart. "One latte with an extra shot of espresso, just the way you like it," she said, placing the mug in front of me. "You're good," I conceded, impressed. She pulled up a chair and sat across from me, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. "So," she began, leaning forward slightly, "tell me more about this project manager who braves Kansas downpours in high heels." We fell into easy conversation once more, the initial awkwardness of our first encounter replaced by a comfortable familiarity. We talked about our families, or rather, the lack thereof. Both of us had lost our parents years ago and had forged our own paths, carving out lives for ourselves in Overland Park. We discussed our dreams and aspirations, our fears and insecurities. I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't with anyone in a long time. There was something about Kennedy's presence, her attentiveness, that made me feel safe and seen. As the afternoon wore on, the cafe began to empty. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, painting the walls in hues of orange and gold. Kennedy and I were the last ones left, lost in conversation, our hands occasionally brushing as we reached for the sugar dispenser. The air between us crackled with an unspoken energy, a tension that was both exhilarating and slightly unnerving. I found myself captivated by her every gesture, every inflection in her voice, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. When I finally glanced at my watch, I was surprised to see how late it was. "Wow," I breathed. "I didn't realize the time. I should probably get going." A flicker of disappointment crossed Kennedy's face. "Me too," she said softly. We stood up simultaneously, our bodies close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from hers. As we reached the door, she hesitated, her hand hovering near mine. Then, impulsively, she reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering against my cheek for a moment. A shiver ran down my spine. "I had a really nice time, Fiona," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes held mine, and I saw a flicker of something intense, something that mirrored the emotions swirling within me. "Me too," I replied, my voice equally soft. The silence stretched between us, charged with unspoken words and desires. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in and kissed her. It was a brief, tentative kiss, a feather-light touch of lips against lips, but it was enough to send a jolt of electricity through my entire body. She pulled back slightly, her eyes wide with surprise. For a heartbeat, I thought I had misread the signals, that I had overstepped. But then a slow smile spread across her face, and she leaned back in, her hand finding mine. This kiss was deeper, more insistent. A silent acknowledgement of the undeniable connection that had sparked between us in the rain. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, our cheeks flushed, our hands intertwined. The rain had stopped, and the city lights twinkled outside the cafe window. As I walked away, I couldn't stop smiling. I knew this was just the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances, lingering touches, and increasingly flirtatious text messages. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from Kennedy, witty observations about daily life, playful teasing, and late-night confessions that left me breathless. I found myself constantly checking my phone, a silly grin plastered across my face. It was exhilarating, this giddy feeling of newfound connection, the anticipation of our next encounter. Work became a distraction, my mind wandering back to Kennedy and our stolen moments together. I'd catch myself doodling her name in the margins of my notes, my thoughts consumed by the memory of her lips on mine. The way her hand felt in mine. Even the most mundane tasks seemed infused with a newfound energy, a vibrant sense of possibility. One evening, Kennedy texted me, "Picnic in the park tomorrow?" I make a mean grilled cheese. My heart skipped a beat. A picnic. It sounded perfect. "I'll bring the wine," I replied, already picturing us sprawled out on a blanket, sharing food and laughter under the warm Kansas sun. The next day, we met at Luce Park, a sprawling oasis of green in the heart of Overland Park. Kennedy had packed a basket overflowing with gourmet sandwiches, fresh fruit, and homemade cookies. I brought a bottle of chilled rose and a soft checkered blanket. We found a secluded spot under a sprawling oak tree, the sunlight dappling through the leaves. As we ate, we talked about everything and nothing, our conversation flowing effortlessly between lighthearted banter and deeper, more personal revelations. I learned about Kennedy's passion for rescuing stray animals, her dream of opening a second café location, and her surprisingly competitive streak when it came to board games. I shared my own anxieties about my career, my longing for a deeper connection, and my secret love for cheesy romantic comedies. With every passing hour, the connection between us deepened. I found myself drawn to her easy laughter, her infectious enthusiasm, and the way her eyes lit up when she talked about something she was passionate about. She had a way of making me feel completely at ease, completely myself. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park, a comfortable silence settled between us. We lay back on the blanket, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, creating a soothing symphony of nature. I turned my head to look at Kennedy, her profile outlined against the fading light. She was breathtaking. A stray strand of hair had fallen across her face. Without thinking, I reached out and gently tucked it behind her ear. My fingers lingered against her cheek, the skin soft and warm beneath my touch. She turned her head towards me, her blue eyes meeting mine. The air between us crackled with unspoken desire. "You have something," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, "right there." My thumb gently grazed her cheekbone, tracing the delicate curve of her jawline. She closed her eyes, a soft sigh escaping her lips. The moment stretched, suspended in time, the world around us fading away. Then, slowly, deliberately, she leaned in and kissed me. This kiss was different from our first tentative encounter outside the café. This kiss was deeper, more passionate, filled with a yearning that had been building between us since that rainy afternoon. Her lips were soft and warm against mine, her hand finding its way to my hair, gently cradling the back of my head. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer, deepening the kiss. The world spun around us, a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the sweet aroma of Kennedy's perfume, creating an intoxicating mix that filled my senses. The gentle breeze felt like a caress against my skin, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. In that moment, nothing else mattered. There was only Kennedy, and the overwhelming feeling of being exactly where I was supposed to be. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless, our cheeks flushed, our hearts pounding in unison. The silence that followed was charged with emotion, a silent acknowledgement of the profound connection we had discovered. We lay intertwined on the blanket, our fingers interlaced, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. I knew with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The weeks that followed the picnic in the park were a whirlwind of stolen moments and deepening intimacy. Kennedy and I fell into a comfortable rhythm, our days punctuated by clandestine meetings in the back room of her café, lingering kisses in darkened doorways, and late-night phone calls that stretched into the early hours of the morning. We explored the city hand in hand, discovering hidden gems and sharing inside jokes that only we understood. It felt as though we were creating our own private world, a sanctuary from the ordinary. The physical connection between us intensified, fueled by a mutual desire that was both exhilarating and slightly terrifying. Our first time together was in my apartment, a night of nervous anticipation and tender exploration. The light filtering through the blinds painted stripes across the walls as I slowly unhooked my striped cotton bralette, the soft fabric pooling around my waist. Kennedy's gaze was intense, her blue eyes filled with a mixture of desire and adoration. The air crackled with an unspoken energy, a silent understanding that transcended words. We moved together, our bodies entwined, exploring the uncharted territory of our newfound intimacy with a mixture of reverence and playful abandon. The world outside faded away, replaced by the intoxicating rhythm of our shared breaths, the warmth of skin against skin, the whispered words of encouragement and affection. Later, nestled in the tangled sheets, a sense of peace washed over me. I had never felt so seen, so accepted, so completely cherished. Kennedy traced the lines of my hand with her fingertip, her touch sending shivers down my spine. "I feel like I've known you forever," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I turned my head to look at her, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the bedside lamp. "Me too," I murmured, my heart swelling with a mixture of love and gratitude. Our relationship quickly became a cornerstone of my life. I introduced Kennedy to my friends, who instantly embraced her warmth and infectious laughter. We attended a local LGBTQ pride event together, holding hands without hesitation, feeling a sense of belonging and solidarity that I had never experienced before. The world felt brighter, more vibrant, as though everything had been painted in a fresh coat of paint. One evening, while we were closing up the café together, Kennedy surprised me with a pair of vintage vinyl records she had found at a local antique shop. One was a first pressing of my favorite Fleetwood Mac album, the other a rare jazz record I had been searching for months. "I know how much you love these," she said, a shy smile playing on her lips. "I hope you like them." I was touched by her thoughtfulness, by her ability to remember the smallest details about my life. I reached out and took her hand, my fingers intertwining with hers. "I love them," I whispered, my gaze locking with hers. "And I love you." The words hung in the air between us, unspoken until that moment, but now out in the open, raw and vulnerable. A slow smile spread across Kennedy's face, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I love you too, Fiona," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. We stood there, holding each other close, the silence filled with the unspoken promise of a future together. The feeling of happiness was almost overwhelming. I felt like I was finally living the life I had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of an incredible woman. Everything felt perfect, almost too good to be true. And as we all know, whenever things feel too good to be true, something usually comes along to shake things up. The curveball arrived in the form of a phone call from my boss. "Fiona," he began, his voice unusually formal, "I need you to come to my office first thing tomorrow morning. There's something we need to discuss." A knot of apprehension tightened in my stomach. I had a feeling this wasn't about a routine performance review. The next morning, I sat across from my boss, my heart pounding in my chest. He wasted no time getting to the point. "Fiona," he said, "we've been incredibly impressed with your work on the Peterson account. Your leadership and innovative thinking have been instrumental in securing this contract." He paused, his gaze meeting mine. "We'd like to offer you a promotion." Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of excitement. A promotion. This was something I had been working towards for years. But then he continued, "The position is based at our headquarters in Chicago." My breath caught in my throat. Chicago. Hundreds of miles away from Overland Park, away from Kennedy, away from everything I had built with her. The knot in my stomach tightened again, this time with a different kind of tension. The rest of the meeting was a blur. I vaguely remember discussing the details of the new role, the increased responsibilities, the significant pay raise. But my mind was racing, trying to process the implications of this unexpected opportunity. A promotion meant career advancement, financial security, a chance to prove myself on a larger scale. But it also meant leaving Kennedy, leaving the life we had created together, leaving the woman I loved. That evening, I sat across from Kennedy at our usual table in her café, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The whimsical decor and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, usually a source of comfort, now seemed to mock my inner turmoil. I told her about the promotion, my voice trembling slightly as I relayed the details. She listened intently, her blue eyes fixed on mine, her expression unreadable. When I finished, a heavy silence settled between us. "So," she finally said, her voice soft, "what are you going to do?" I looked down at my hands, twisting the silver ring on my finger. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's a huge opportunity, Kennedy, something I've always dreamed of." I looked up at her, searching her face for some sign of understanding. "But I don't want to leave you." She reached across the table and took my hand, her touch sending a wave of warmth through me. "I know," she said softly, her thumb gently stroking the back of my hand. "This is your dream, Fiona. You have to go for it." A tear escaped my eye, tracing a path down my cheek. "But what about us?" I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Kennedy's gaze held mine, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "We'll figure it out," she said firmly. "We'll make it work. Long distance isn't ideal, but it's not impossible." She squeezed my hand, her touch reassuring. "This is your chance, Fiona. Don't let it slip away because of me." Her words, though supportive, felt like a small knife twisting in my gut. The idea of being separated from her, of navigating the complexities of a long-distance relationship, filled me with a sense of dread. But I knew she was right. This was my chance, an opportunity I couldn't afford to pass up. I just didn't know how we would survive it. The weight of the decision settled upon me, heavy and suffocating. The playful atmosphere of the café, once a comforting embrace, now felt like a cruel reminder of everything I was about to lose. The colorful decorations seemed to blur into a dizzying array of shapes and hues, the cheerful chatter of the other patrons fading into a dull hum. The knot in my stomach tightened, a physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil raging within me. I wanted the promotion, the advancement, the recognition. But at what cost? The thought of leaving Kennedy, of trading our shared intimacy for fleeting weekend visits and pixelated video calls, felt like a betrayal of everything we had built together. It was a choice between my ambition and my heart, a choice I never thought I'd have to make. The move to Chicago was a blur of packing boxes, tearful goodbyes, and the gnawing feeling of leaving a piece of myself behind in Overland Park. The excitement of the new job was overshadowed by the ache in my heart, the constant reminder of Kennedy's absence. My sleek, modern apartment in the heart of the city felt sterile and impersonal, a stark contrast to the cozy familiarity of my old life. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of new faces, new responsibilities, and the relentless pressure to prove myself in a demanding corporate environment. I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the growing distance between Kennedy and me. We spoke on the phone every night, our conversations a mixture of forced cheerfulness and underlying anxiety. We tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, sharing details about our days, making plans for weekend visits, sending each other silly memes and encouraging texts. But the physical distance between us began to manifest as an emotional chasm, a growing void that threatened to swallow us whole. The weekend visits were a bittersweet mix of intense joy and agonizing goodbyes. We'd cram as much as possible into those 2 short days. Exploring the city, trying new restaurants, rekindling the physical intimacy that had become a cornerstone of our relationship. But the inevitable departure at the airport always hung over us, a dark cloud casting a shadow over our fleeting moments of happiness. The goodbyes became increasingly difficult, each parting a fresh wound that seemed to take longer and longer to heal. Misunderstandings began to creep into our conversations, fueled by the lack of physical proximity and the growing sense of disconnect. A missed phone call, a misinterpreted text message, a seemingly innocuous comment, everything became amplified, distorted by the distance between us. The easy banter we once shared was replaced by strained silences and tense exchanges. The jealousy, once a dormant ember, began to flicker back to life, fueled by insecurities and the fear of losing each other. One weekend, during a visit to Overland Park, the simmering tension finally boiled over. We were at Kennedy's apartment discussing the possibility of her visiting me in Chicago. "I just don't know when I can get away from the café," she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's been so busy lately." I interpreted her hesitation as disinterest, as a sign that she wasn't willing to put in the effort to make our long-distance relationship work. "So, you're saying you don't want to come visit me?" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Kennedy's eyes flashed with hurt. "That's not what I said, Fiona," she retorted, her voice tight with frustration. She trailed off, shaking her head. "It's complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, the word dripping with sarcasm. Or is it just that you don't care enough?" The words hung in the air between us, sharp and venomous. I instantly regretted saying them, but the damage was done. The argument escalated quickly, fueled by months of pent-up frustration and unspoken fears. We hurled accusations at each other, our words laced with anger and resentment. The love that had once bound us together, now a twisted, tangled mess. We said things we didn't mean, things we couldn't take back. The fight ended with me storming out of her apartment, tears streaming down my face, the silence of the night amplifying the deafening roar of my own insecurities. As I walked through the familiar streets of Overland Park, the city lights blurring through my tears, I felt a profound sense of loss. I had come here seeking solace, seeking the comfort of Kennedy's arms, the reassurance of her love. Instead, I found myself alone, lost in a maze of doubt and uncertainty. The distance, once a manageable obstacle, now seemed like an insurmountable barrier, a vast expanse separating me from the woman I loved. I questioned everything, the move to Chicago, the promotion, the viability of our relationship. Had I made a terrible mistake? Had I sacrificed my happiness for a career advancement that now felt hollow and meaningless? The weight of my choices pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. The vibrant city, once a symbol of opportunity and excitement, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping me in a life I no longer recognized. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant reminder of everything I had left behind. The future I had envisioned with Kennedy, a future filled with shared dreams and unwavering support, now seemed like a distant, unattainable fantasy. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew, with a chilling certainty, that things would never be the same again. The weeks following the fight with Kennedy were the longest of my life. The silence between us was deafening, a vast expanse of unspoken words and unresolved emotions. I threw myself into my work, burying myself in spreadsheets and conference calls, trying to drown out the constant ache in my heart. Chicago, once a symbol of opportunity and excitement, now felt like a concrete prison, each towering skyscraper a monument to my isolation. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford, my nights plagued by restless tossing and turning, my dreams filled with fragmented memories of Kennedy's laughter, her touch, the scent of her perfume. I replayed our fight over and over in my head, dissecting every word, every inflection, every gesture, searching for a way to undo the damage, to bridge the seemingly insurmountable chasm that had opened up between us. One night, after a particularly grueling day at the office, I found myself staring out the window of my apartment, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of color. A wave of exhaustion washed over me, followed by a sudden, overwhelming clarity. I knew with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul that I couldn't live without Kennedy. My career ambitions, my desire for professional recognition, all of it paled in comparison to the love we shared. I grabbed my phone and booked the first flight to Overland Park. I didn't call Kennedy, didn't text her, didn't give her any warning. I simply needed to see her, to tell her how I felt, to beg for her forgiveness. The next morning, I stood outside the Mad Hatter's tea party, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar whimsical decor, once a source of comfort, now filled me with a mixture of hope and trepidation. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, the tinkling of the bell announcing my arrival. Kennedy was behind the counter, her back to me, her dark hair pulled back in a familiar bun. She looked up as I approached, her blue eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, the world stood still. The air crackled with unspoken emotion, the silence heavy with the weight of our unresolved conflict. "Fiona?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the soft hum of the café. I reached out and took her hand, my fingers intertwining with hers. "Kennedy," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I'm so sorry." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I was wrong. I was stupid. I let my ambition get in the way of what truly matters. I can't live without you. I poured out my heart to her, confessing my fears, my insecurities, my unwavering love for her. I told her about the loneliness of Chicago, the emptiness of my success without her by my side. I told her that I was willing to give up everything, my career, my apartment, my entire life in Chicago, to be with her again. When I finished, a tear traced a path down Kennedy's cheek. She reached out and cupped my face in her hands, her touch sending a wave of warmth through me. "I missed you so much," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I thought I had lost you." I leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was filled with longing, forgiveness, and the unwavering promise of a future together. The world around us faded away, replaced by the familiar comfort of her lips on mine, the feeling of her arms wrapped tightly around me. "I have an idea," I said, pulling back slightly, a mischievous glint in my eyes. "What if we opened a Mad Hatter's Tea Party in Chicago? A little piece of overland park in the heart of the city." Kennedy's eyes lit up, a spark of excitement igniting within them. "Are you serious?" she breathed, her voice filled with wonder. I nodded, my smile widening. "Completely serious. We can do this, Kennedy. Together." And so we embarked on a new adventure, a journey that would take us from the familiar streets of Overland Park to the bustling metropolis of Chicago. We found a charming storefront in a vibrant neighborhood, decorated it with whimsical artwork and mismatched furniture, and filled it with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and homemade pastries. The Mad Hatter's Tea Party Chicago became a haven for those seeking a moment of escape, a place where laughter and conversation flowed freely, a testament to the power of love and second chances. We built a life together, a life filled with shared dreams, unwavering support, and the comforting knowledge that, no matter where life took us, we would always have each other. And as I stood beside Kennedy, watching the customers fill our little café, I knew with the certainty that resonated deep within my soul that I had finally found my happily ever after.